Now I wanted to briefly focus on the issue of repression, and repression is always bad for the movement. And sometimes it may backfire, but sometimes it may not, like it happened in Tiananmen Square, where the authorities used a lot of repression, and there was not much backfire afterwards, apart from international backfire probably, and that led to the imposition of sanctions, but not domestic. And the movement then was essentially put down. So what kind of strategies and tactics do you see that the movement is adopting, umbrella movement is adopting, in order, for example, to reduce the risk of repression, while at the same time maintaining a certain pressure on the authorities? Do you think that they actually kind of protecting themselves well, and something could be improved in terms of how they manage the risk of being repressed, or they do the right thing?
Well, so far protesters have really relied on strength in numbers. So whenever there are a lot of people showing up on the side of the counter-protesters, then there will be immediate calls on Facebook, well, we need more reinforcements. And so this is how we say, in a way, so one, this is a social media revolution, and two, this is more or less a self-organized movement. People just get themselves organized in order to deal with the challenges. At the same time, it is quite remarkable that Hong Kong people have really maintained such nonviolence discipline in the face of both police and thug violence. The police violence, in a way that there was nothing you could do when the police were pointing gunshots at you. So that's actually more understandable. But when the thugs began to also really beat up protesters and sexually harass the female protesters, we could see on the faces on live stream that they really had to control themselves. You can see how hard they were really trying to control themselves. Now it was interesting that on Friday, I think also on Friday, October 3rd, actually the protesters in Mong Kok, when they were confronted with so many counter-protesters, someone was trying to pick up just a loud halo in order to talk to the counter-protesters. For whatever reason, that there was a birthday song recorded on the loud halo, and then protesters somehow, oh, cool, we'll just sing along to the tune. And then whatever worked, because that seemed to really work to drown out the voices of all the, the curses by counter-protesters. And that message was basically went viral on social media. And all the other protest sites then adopted it. So anytime there was this, basically Hong Kong people can be infamously creative in a way that there are these little tactics that they have adopted. Mm-hmm. Also, they also have used all kinds of art forms to spread the message. But what is also interesting is that we mentioned early on that because of the constitutional structure, Hong Kong has freedom but no democracy. So Hong Kong people have been very good at mobilizing mass people power. We have problems, we need more people to protect the students, to protect the existing protesters. They don't really think of, what scholars of contentious politics also point out, their methods of dispersal. There's this big debate, should we withdraw or should we stand our ground? If we withdraw, the sentiment is that we will lose everything. There will be no more momentum, and now we have to basically continue to occupy these sites. We have to make sure that we maintain. On September 28th, students were actually saying that with the police use of tear gas, we should actually now stage a citywide boycott. We should do different forms of boycott. We should have different forms of strikes. Mm-hmm. Nothing has actually come out of that. So maybe Hong Kong people should really think about maybe targeted boycotts. You choose a list. You have a list of businesses that really support CY, support the use of police use of tear gas, and then you have another list of businesses that are pro-democracy, and then you have targeted boycott. In that case, then people can go back to school, can go back to work, and continue to basically lead normal lives, and yet they can still continue to contribute to the movement and keep the movement's momentum.
Yeah, I think we need to understand it as a kind of competition between the government and the protesters for the hearts and minds of Hong Kong people. So if the protesters overreach or block up the people's lives for too long, they risk losing support. You risk a kind of reaction against the protest, that their people get a kind of what I call protest fatigue. So it's a balancing act, I think, and the protesters are mindful that they don't want to annoy the public too much, but for the reasons Victoria mentioned, they're also worried about losing ground. So that this is something I think we still have to sort out, the balance, the right balance.
Mm-hmm. So do you see any discussions, for example, about diversifying those methods to include boycott, for example, against tycoons that are pro-government, and that in turn those tycoons could maybe exercise some pressure on the government to compromise, or that hasn't been yet even brought up?
I have seen different postings on Facebook that people circulate. So actually, there are already some really hated businesses. I've seen actually messages that we should boycott these guys. But yeah, so then like this slide shows that there are actually many different methods of nonviolent tactics. We don't really just have to focus on demonstration and boycott or massive gathering. But even though I've seen actually these messages now and then over the last few weeks, but I haven't really seen any concrete action yet. So I don't know if they'll start picking up on this. But one thing I can also say is that until more recently, Hong Kong has enjoyed freedom without democracy, and so just basically organizing mass rallies, mass demonstration with 500,000 people on the street has been a very viable option. In many other cases, very often people would have turned to methods of dispersal in order to avoid repression. Because if you send people to the square, to Tahrir Square, for example, everyone could just be picked up and killed. But in Hong Kong, you don't expect that. The problem is that the Hong Kong police have become increasingly arbitrary. There have been more and more cases of police abuse, and now that the right police have shown their faces the first time, expect them to come back. And in this kind of an increasingly repressive environment, then I guess necessity has to become the mother of creativity. Then protesters will have to be more creative in coming up with methods of dispersal.